When people think about threats to the long-term health of a nation, they often imagine wars, pandemics, or global conflicts. But some of the most dangerous forces are internal, slow, silent, and self-inflicted. One of the greatest risks facing the United States today is not an enemy from the outside, but a pattern of decisions we continue to make from within. And the most alarming part? We know better, but we keep doing it anyway. Scott Williams from Portland, Oregon, recently asked Warren Buffett a simple but powerful question. Do you believe the long-term impact of the Department of Defense will be positive or negative for the economic health of the United States? And Buffett, half joking, replied, "Well, why don't you ask me something easy?" Then he gave one of the most brutally honest answers of the event. He began not with defense spending, but with a deeper issue, bureaucracy, not just in government, but in our entire system. Bureaucracy, he explained, is not only widespread, it's contagious, even in capitalism, even in the most powerful corporations on earth. Most companies, maybe even Berkshire Hathaway, could be run better, he said. But government is a different beast entirely. In business, at least some market forces provide pressure to operate efficiently. In government, there are no real checks, no limits, no bottom lines. And that, Buffett says, is what truly scares him when thinking about the future of America's currency. Because government doesn't just operate inefficiently. It can print money. And that's the root problem. When elected officials can promise anything to win votes, with no practical constraints, long-term consequences get ignored. The focus shifts to popularity and short-term satisfaction. No politician, Buffett quips, ever wins by telling someone, "Your breath is bad. Please step back." And so the cycle continues. But cycles built on denial have a breaking point. We are currently operating under a fiscal deficit that is unsustainable in the long run. No one knows if that long run means 2 years or 20. The U.S. is unique. We've never seen a country quite like it. But what we do know is this. If something cannot go on forever, it won't. That's a direct quote from economist Herbert Stein. Right now, we are doing something that cannot continue forever, and we're acting like we can somehow outrun math. We can't. At some point, it gets out of control. You stop trying to fix it. You give up. That's the danger Buffett warns against. The point where even trying feels useless. That point nearly arrived once before. Paul Volcker helped pull us back from the edge in the 1980s. Inflation surged, but we avoided catastrophe. So far. But Buffett is clear. This isn't something you want to experiment with. Hyperinflation is not a theory. It's a virus, one that feeds on itself. Once it starts, it's hard to stop. It destroys trust, ruins savings, punishes discipline, and rewards manipulation. Personally, Buffett said, I wouldn't want the job of fixing this. And who would? Today, the U.S. runs a deficit equal to 7% of its GDP. A sustainable level is likely closer to 3%. The further we drift from that mark, the closer we move toward chaos. That's not a political statement. It's an arithmetic fact. What's worse is that Congress, the one institution with the power to act, doesn't seem interested in solving the problem. Political paralysis has become the norm. Short-term popularity outweighs long-term responsibility. And yet, this isn't a challenge imposed on us from outside. It's self-inflicted. We are, in Buffett's words, the most successful country in the history of the world. We have the most powerful economic engine, the most resilient institutions, the greatest base of innovation and talent. And yet, we're at risk of breaking our own system from the inside. The fastest way to destroy all of it? Corrupt the currency. And we're already halfway there. See, the problem isn't just overspending. It's the incentive structure. In theory, you'd expect mistakes to have consequences. But in today's system, mistakes are often rewarded. There is no pain for failure, only the appearance of more funding, more influence, and more political capital. The people who manipulate the system aren't punished. They thrive. And that's where the real danger lies. Because when faith in a country's money erodes, the people who trusted the system lose, and the ones who exploited it win. That's how you erode the moral structure of a nation. So what's the answer? It starts with honesty. with admitting that we are not immune to the forces that destroyed other civilizations, with acknowledging that we've drifted too far and need to reset. And it starts with leadership that isn't afraid to do the hard, unpopular, necessary things. Buffett admits he doesn't want that job. And looking at the state of Congress, it's clear no one else does either. But someone will have to do it before the math does it for us. Now I'd like to hear what you think. Do you believe the U.S. will correct this course in time? Or are we already too far gone? Leave a comment below. Your voice adds to the dialogue. And if this message challenged your thinking, don't keep it to yourself. Share it forward. Someone you know may need to hear this today. What if you had the opportunity to go back to 1776? Imagine sitting under a tree next to Benjamin Franklin as the foundations of a new nation are being written, not just in ink, but in principle, in vision, in values. What would you contribute? What economic pillars would you fight for? And most importantly, how would you build a system strong enough to endure centuries of change, disruption, war, and evolution? That was the spirit behind one of the most thoughtful questions ever asked at a Berkshire Hathaway meeting. A young man named Sasha from Germany stood up and said, "Mr. Buffett, imagine it's the year 1776, and you're sitting beside Benjamin Franklin helping shape the foundation of a new nation. What core economic principles would you defend in order to create a just, resilient, and opportunity-driven capitalist society, one capable of sustaining long-term prosperity for future generations?" Buffett paused, then smiled. "That's a fantastic question," he said, "but I'd probably just tell Ben to keep thinking. He wouldn't need to hear from me. Humility, even in imagination." Buffett went on to describe Franklin as one of the most remarkable people who ever lived, a man so intellectually complete that he could navigate every area of society's design, from science to diplomacy, economics to ethics. In fact, Franklin understood compound interest so well that he left parts of his estate to the cities of Boston and Philadelphia, specifically to be held for over 200 years, just to prove the power of long-term thinking. He didn't just look ahead to the next generation. He looked ahead to the next 10. That, Buffett hinted, is a lesson worth remembering. But as the question asked, what principles would guide the creation of a thriving, fair capitalist system? Let's explore a few. 1. Build prosperity on humility, not arrogance. Buffett made a subtle but critical point. "We've been extraordinarily fortunate in this country," he said, "but that doesn't give us the right to lecture others. In a world of over 8 billion people, no nation can afford to isolate itself, nor should it try to dominate others by preaching its way as the only way. Just a few centuries ago, entirely different countries ruled the world. Now that the U.S. stands tall, it must resist the temptation to gloat. The real strength of a nation lies not in exporting advice, but in embodying example. If we build something worth emulating, others will follow, not because we told them to, but because they saw it work. That a foundational economic principle, influenced by merit, not mandate. 2. Design with restraint, especially where power is involved. Buffett spoke frankly about how dangerous it is to build systems without limits, especially when it comes to technology, weapons, or financial tools. There was no alternative to developing the atomic bomb, he acknowledged. But today, we've gone from one country with nuclear capacity to 8. Soon, it'll be 9, maybe more. That's a mistake society simply can't repeat. If you want a principle to protect the future, here it is. Don't create systems you can't control once unleashed. It's easy to build power. It's much harder to contain it. So whether it's a currency, a corporation, or a weapon, design with the end game in mind. Ask not only what something can do, but what it might do in the hands of the wrong people, under the wrong circumstances. Franklin might not have imagined nuclear weapons, but he understood human nature. So did Buffett's father, who served in Congress when the first bomb was dropped. The decision-making process was so secret that most members of the House had no idea they were funding Los Alamos, or the early research centers in Chicago and Tennessee. Let that sink in. A democratic institution passed life-altering budgets without knowing what they were really paying for. Transparency isn't just ethical. It's economically essential. 3. Anchor society in a stable currency. Above all, Buffett returned to one theme: A stable currency is the cornerstone of any prosperous society. Without it, trust erodes. Savings lose meaning. Responsible behavior is punished, and wealth concentrates into the hands of those who know how to manipulate volatility. You don't want to live in a society like that, Buffett warned. A collapsing currency doesn't just cause inflation. It disintegrates the moral contract between citizen and state. The people who play by the rules lose. The people who exploit the system win. And eventually, even the middle class, the backbone of any thriving economy, begins to disappear. That's when instability rises. Not just economically, but socially. If you were building a new nation from scratch, and you wanted to last, you'd start by protecting the value of its money, not with false promises, not with political games, but with disciplined foresight and the courage to say no, even when yes is easier. That's not just an economic idea. It's a moral one. 4. Create feedback loops that reward integrity. The reason corruption thrives in so many systems is because there's no real cost to doing the wrong thing. In many cases, there's a reward. Want to fix that? Change the incentives. Build a society where truth is valued, where long-term thinking is rewarded, where people who build quietly are honored more than those who manipulate loudly. That's how you create compounding trust, a resource even more valuable than compounding interest. Buffett's message was clear. The greatest threat to any system is the erosion of trust, and trust starts with fairness. And finally, 5. Don't just build a country that wins. Build one that endures. Buffett closed his answer with a reflection on how far the world has come. Just 200 years ago, a bad tooth meant a shot of whiskey and a pair of pliers. Crossing the Missouri River meant waiting for it to freeze. A woman in labor might be lying in a wagon on a frozen river, praying she'd make it across alive. And yet, somehow we arrived here. We now live in a time where opportunity is greater, life is longer, and possibilities are endless. But how do we preserve that? How do we not just maintain it, but expand it for those who come next? Buffett's answer was honest. He doesn't know what Benjamin Franklin would do about nuclear proliferation, or about global income inequality, or about the hyper-connected, ultra-fragmented digital age we're living through. But he knows this. The future depends on what we choose to protect now. And that begins with responsibility, with humility, with clarity, and with the refusal to build systems that reward the wrong behavior. The United States remains, in Buffett's words, the best place and the best time to be alive. But prosperity is not self-sustaining. It's a choice, one that must be made, renewed, and defended with every generation. What would you tell Benjamin Franklin if you were sitting beside him in 1776? What principle would you fight for above all else? Share your vision in the comments. Someone might read it and see the spark of something powerful. If this made you pause and think, pass it on. Conversations like this matter. When you think about the rise of the United States over the past 250 years, it's almost too extraordinary to grasp. A group of rebels in a fragile, undeveloped land built a system that would one day lead the world in innovation, capital, and influence. It wasn't luck. It was an accident. It was a combination of ideas, structure, and character, all fueled by one foundational force: belief in the future. But what happens when belief fades? What happens when trust erodes, not in other people, but in the system itself? Warren Buffett has spent a lifetime studying the inner mechanics of capitalism, not just as a means to build wealth, but as an engine of human progress. And today, he sees warning signs flashing across the dashboard, not because of a war, not because of a market crash, but because of something far more silent and corrosive: the erosion of monetary integrity. At the core of every stable society is a stable currency. That's not economic theory. It's historical fact. Nations that lost control of their money lost everything. Civilizations with strong armies, strong borders, even strong ideas, they crumble when their currencies collapsed. Because when money loses meaning, so does everything it touches: contracts, pensions, savings, wages, trust. Buffett warns that we're edging closer to that line, not because we lack intelligence or opportunity. Quite the opposite. The U.S. remains the most productive, innovative, and talent-rich nation on earth. Our economic engine is still the envy of the world. But we are doing the one thing that can break even the strongest machine. We're tampering with its foundation. We're overspending. We're overpromising. We're printing money without discipline. And worst of all, we're treating these actions as normal, as if the consequences will never arrive. But they will. Every unsustainable system eventually stops. As Herbert Stein said, if something cannot go on forever, it will stop. And that's the heart of Buffett's message. We still have time to fix it, but not forever. The real cost of short-term thinking. In today's political environment, long-term thinking has become rare. Elections are won with promises, not plans. Budgets are passed with band-aids, not reform. And leaders, many of them well-intentioned, find themselves trapped in a cycle that punishes responsibility and rewards noise. That's not sustainable. No household, no business, and certainly no nation can spend more than it earns indefinitely. Eventually, the bill arrives. The question isn't if, it's when and how painful it will be. The deficit, currently around 7% of GDP, is already more than double what's considered sustainable. And each year we delay hard decisions, the harder they become, because deficits compound just like interest. Only this time, it's not building wealth. It's building pressure, from prosperity to fragility. Here's the paradox. The more successful a country becomes, the more vulnerable it is to arrogance. And America, the most successful nation in history, is now at risk of forgetting what made it successful in the first place. It wasn't just entrepreneurship, or freedom, or markets. It was discipline, accountability, and a shared belief that hard work should pay off, not be wiped away by inflation or distorted by corruption. Buffett described the United States as a machine for producing capital, knowledge, and talent like the world has never seen. But that machine can break, not from outside sabotage, but from inside neglect. And what breaks first? Trust. Trust in the system. Trust in leadership. Trust in the future. And when that trust disappears, everything that depends on it begins to wobble. Home prices, bond markets, bank balances, business investments, retirement funds. That's why Buffett fears inflation so deeply, not just for financial cost, but for its moral one. It silently penalizes a saver, rewards a speculator, and widens the gap between those who understand the system and those who are crushed by it. What the founders would warn us today. Go back to that image, sitting beside Benjamin Franklin in 1776. What would he say if he saw us now? If he saw the nation that came from his ideas, now risking it all by breaking its own rules? Buffett doesn't pretend to know exactly what Franklin would do, but he knows this. Franklin believed in balance. He believed in planning for future generations. He believed in humility, even as he helped design one of the boldest experiments in political history. Franklin, the man who coined "a penny saved is a penny earned," wouldn't celebrate a system that prints its way out of responsibility. He'd call it what it is, short-term thinking that robs the future. And yet, there's still time to return to principles that made this country great. Not slogans, not sentiment. Systems. Fiscal responsibility over political convenience. Transparency over complexity. Strength with humility. Innovation with restraint. Wealth with fairness. If we want prosperity to last another 250 years, those aren't optional. They're non-negotiable. A choice that must be made. Buffett doesn't pretend it will be easy. Fixing the deficit, stabilizing the currency, and rebalancing incentives will require courage. The kind of courage that doesn't poll well. But it must be done, because if we fail, the cost isn't just economic. It's existential. And if we succeed, if we restore faith in our money, discipline in our policies, and truth in our systems, then the American story won't just continue. It will expand, lifting not only the next generation, but the world watching from the sidelines, hoping we still know what we're doing. Buffett ended his thoughts with a reflection both sobering and hopeful. The United States is still the best place and the best time in history to be alive. That's true, but staying that way, that's a decision. If you made it to the end of this message, you're not just a spectator. You're someone who cares about where we're headed. So take a second to check if you're subscribed. Many people who watch never click that button and miss critical ideas like these. make sure you're in. The next conversation might be the one that matters most.